Struggling single mom gasped when the tech billionaire father turned around at her child's school. He was the ruthless ex who divorced her for being too skinny, then married her half-sister. She only saw the back view of the billionaire CEO at parent-teacher night. As he turned, her world stopped. It was the man who had divorced her for being too skinny. Amara, he said, her name sounding foreign on his lips after so many years. Garrick, she managed, her voice steadier than she felt. Of all the schools in all the cities in all the world, you walk into mine. Before he could respond, her daughter tugged at her sleeve. Mom, why are you looking at Emery's dad like that? Emery's dad? The words felt like glass in her throat. Yeah, Mr. Thornfield. He's in my advanced science group. The innocent explanation crashed like thunder in Amara's ears. Her daughter, the one he never knew existed, was classmates with the son he'd had with her half-sister. I had no idea Lyra attended Westmont, Garrick said, his expression now carefully composed. And I had no idea you had a son here, she replied coldly. Though I suppose that was the point of divorcing the wife who was too skinny to bear your children, wasn't it? To find someone who could. Have you ever imagined coming face to face with the person who rejected you for the very essence of who you are? The person who stood before family and friends and declared your body defective, unworthy of love. What would you say to them? How would you feel seeing them living the life they claimed you couldn't provide? And what if that encounter wasn't just about your past, but now entangled the futures of innocent children who had no part in your history? This is the story of Amara Curry, a woman who rebuilt her life after being publicly humiliated and divorced for a physical condition beyond her control, and of Garrick Thornfield, the billionaire CEO who once judged her worth by her appearance, only to find himself confronting the same condition in his own child years later. Two parents whose painful past is suddenly, unexpectedly connected through their children, forcing them to navigate a present neither could have anticipated. Join me as we explore what happens when karma brings life full circle, when the prejudices we hold return to teach us their cruelest lessons, and when children become the bridge between broken adults. If you've ever been judged for your appearance or found yourself regretting the shallow values you once held, this story will resonate deep within your heart. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that remind us of the profound ironies life sometimes delivers. The parent-teacher night at Westmont Academy was in full swing. The prestigious private school's auditorium hummed with the polite conversations of Silicon Valley's elite discussing their gifted offspring. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over carefully curated displays of student achievements while staff in crisp uniforms circulated with trays of sparkling water and organic hors d'oeuvres. For most parents, it was a comfortable evening of networking and subtle bragging. For Amara Curry, it had just transformed into a nightmare. Lyra, would you please give me a moment to speak with Mr. Thornfield? Amara managed, her voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through her body. Years of managing a medical condition had taught her to maintain composure even when her internal systems were in chaos. But Mom, I wanted to show you my molecular biology project, Lyra protested, her intelligent eyes, so like her father's, darting curiously between the adults. You should definitely see it, Garrick interjected, his voice carrying that same authoritative tone Amara remembered all too well. It's quite remarkable. Emery hasn't stopped talking about it. Your son is interested in molecular biology? The question escaped before she could stop it, genuine surprise momentarily overriding her determination to remain detached. He's particularly fascinated by genetic disorders and metabolic conditions, Garrick replied, something unreadable flickering in his expression. He has a personal interest. The implication hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning Amara wasn't yet prepared to decipher. Before she could respond, a boy approached, tall for his age, with Garrick's distinctive jawline but a slender, almost fragile build that struck Amara with its familiar dimensions. Dad, Miss Peterson wants to talk to you about the science fair, the boy said before noticing Amara and Lyra. His eyes widened slightly in recognition. Oh, hi Lyra. Hi, Emery, Lyra replied with the casual friendliness of classmates. This is my mom. Nice to meet you, Mrs. Curry, Emery said politely, extending a thin hand that Amara took automatically. Lyra helps me a lot in science class. It's Miss Curry, Amara corrected gently, studying the boy with a nutritionist's trained eye. The slender wrists, the particular way he held himself, the careful energy conservation in his movements, all painfully familiar patterns. Emery, why don't you take Lyra to show her mother your projects? Garrick suggested smoothly. I need to speak with Miss Curry briefly about some school committee matters. The children nodded and moved away toward the science displays, leaving the former spouses in a pocket of tense silence amid the bustling room. School committee matters, Amara raised an eyebrow. Creative. I thought, we need to discuss the fact that I divorced you for the same medical condition my son now has might create unwanted attention, Garrick replied, his usual corporate confidence wavering slightly. The blunt acknowledgement stunned Amara momentarily. So he does have it. Metabolic adaptive disorder. Diagnosed 2 years ago. Type 2, like yours. Garrick glanced toward where the children were animatedly discussing a molecular model. The irony isn't lost on me, I assure you. I wouldn't expect you to recognize irony, Amara said coldly. That would require self-awareness. Garrick flinched almost imperceptibly. I deserve that. You deserve considerably more, but this isn't the time or place. Amara smoothed her dress, a habit from years of people staring, judging her slim frame. I'm here for Lyra, not to rehash ancient history. Ancient history that appears to be directly connected to our present, Garrick pointed out. Our children are classmates, Amara. From what Emery tells me, they've become friends. That's Lyra, always drawn to those who need protection, she said pointedly. Something she learned early. The barb hit its mark. Garrick's jaw tightened. Could we perhaps meet somewhere more private? Coffee, perhaps. There are things I think we should discuss given the circumstances. I have nothing to say to you. Then allow me to say what I should have said years ago. His voice dropped, uncharacteristically vulnerable. I was wrong. Catastrophically, unforgivably wrong. Wrong. The unexpected admission caught Amara off guard. Before she could formulate a response, Lyra and Emery returned, both chattering excitedly about their projects. Mom, you have to see this. Emery's researching the same condition you have for his science project. Isn't that cool? Lyra's innocent enthusiasm was like a knife twisting in the tense atmosphere between the adults. Very interesting, Amara managed, watching Garrick's expression carefully. Miss Curry is an expert on metabolic adaptive disorder? Emery asked, his eyes lighting up with scientific curiosity. Dad, you didn't tell me. It's a recent discovery for me as well, Garrick replied carefully. Miss Curry is actually one of the leading nutritionists specializing in metabolic disorders, Garrick continued. Amara blinked in surprise at his knowledge of her professional achievements. How did you? I read your research paper in the Journal of Metabolic Science last year, he admitted. Your name caught my attention, and given Emery's diagnosis, I've been following the field closely. You read my paper. The concept was so unexpected that Amara momentarily forgot her anger. The paper had been her most significant professional contribution, a groundbreaking approach to nutritional management for people with MAD. It's revolutionizing how Emery's doctors approach his treatment, Garrick said quietly. Though they don't know the protocol was developed by his, he trailed off, but the unspoken word hung between them, stepmother. The woman who should have been, in another reality, if he hadn't cast her aside for the very condition his son now lived with. Mom, can Emery come over sometime to interview you for his project? Lyra asked, breaking the tense silence. He's doing research on people who successfully manage MAD, and you're like the perfect example. Amara looked from her daughter's hopeful face to Emery's eager expression, so reminiscent of her own battles with the condition. The boy was thin to the point of frailty, his body clearly struggling with the same metabolic issues that had shaped her entire life, the same issues Garrick had once deemed unacceptable in a wife. I need to check my schedule, she hedged, unwilling to commit while still reeling from this unexpected collision of past and present. Perhaps we could discuss it over that coffee, Garrick suggested, his tone carefully neutral. Trapped by the children's expectant faces, Amara found herself nodding reluctantly. Fine. Coffee. Tomorrow at Meridian Cafe. 9 a.m. Just us, Garrick confirmed, relief evident in his voice. I said coffee with you, not. Please, Miss Curry, Emery interrupted, his expression so earnest it caught her off guard. Your research could really help my project, and maybe help me understand why I'm like this. The vulnerability in the boy's question, so familiar to Amara's own childhood struggles, melted something in her carefully maintained defenses. Whatever issues she had with Garrick, this child was innocent, and he was suffering from the same condition that had defined her life, shaped her career, and ultimately cost her marriage. All right, she conceded. Both of you can come. Can I come too? Lyra asked excitedly. I'm helping Emery with the project. Of course you can, honey, Amara said, unable to deny her daughter anything that sparked her scientific curiosity, even if it meant prolonged contact with the man who had once declared her mother's body unworthy of his family name. As they parted ways to continue the parent-teacher night separately, Amara felt the carefully constructed walls of her new life beginning to crack. 12 years of reinvention, building her career, raising Lyra alone, establishing herself as an expert in the very condition that had once been used against her, all threatened by the reappearance of the man who had set her on this path with his cruel rejection. Later that night, after Lyra had gone to bed, still buzzing with excitement about the project with her new friend, Amara sat at her kitchen table, staring at her laptop screen. Almost against her will, she found herself typing Garrick Thornfield into the search bar, something she had deliberately avoided doing for 12 years. The results were predictably impressive. CEO of Thornfield Technologies at just 39. Fortune 500 company. Philanthropic foundation focusing on medical research. A recent profile in Business Insider lauding his innovative leadership style. And then, buried in a society page from 2 years ago, Thornfield divorce finalized amidst health concerns for son. Her finger hesitated over the link, the professional part of her mind noting how the timing aligned perfectly with Emery's diagnosis. The personal part, the part still bearing scars from her own public humiliation, wanted to close the laptop and maintain the protective distance she'd cultivated for so long. Curiosity 1. The article was brief but telling. Silicon Valley power couple Garrick and Celeste Thornfield have finalized their divorce after 6 years of marriage. Sources close to the family suggest the split comes as the couple faces challenges related to their son Emery's recent health diagnosis. The Thornfield heir, 9, has reportedly been diagnosed with a rare metabolic disorder requiring specialized care. Custody arrangements remain private, but Garrick Thornfield has stepped back from several high-profile business commitments in recent months, citing family priorities as the reason. Amara closed the laptop, her mind racing. The parallels were too stark to ignore. Garrick Thornfield, who had so publicly divorced his first wife for being too thin to bear healthy heirs, now faced the same condition in his son. The condition he had found so repulsive in her that he'd ended their marriage rather than accept it. If she were a different person, there might be satisfaction in this cosmic irony. Instead, she felt a complex mix of emotions, lingering anger at Garrick, sympathy for a child living with a condition she understood all too well, and concern about how this unexpected connection would affect Lyra. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Thank you for agreeing to meet tomorrow. Emery truly admires Lyra and would be grateful for your expertise. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but your insight could make a significant difference for him. Garrick. How had he gotten her number? The same way he apparently kept tabs on her professional publications, she supposed. For a man with his resources, such information would be trivially easy to obtain. She didn't reply, unwilling to engage in any conversation that wasn't face-to-face. Tomorrow would be complicated enough without establishing a text relationship tonight. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by memories she thought long buried. The whispers at social events about her, concerning thinness. The concerned interventions from Garrick's family about her suitability as a future mother. The hushed consultations with fertility specialists who failed to understand that her body weight had nothing to do with her ability to conceive. And finally, the devastating meeting in Garrick's family attorney's office, where terms like incompatibility and irreconcilable differences barely disguised the real issue. Her body didn't meet the Thornfield standard of robust femininity, and no amount of medical explanation could overcome their judgment. She had been 3 months pregnant when he left her. The pregnancy she'd been waiting to announce until after clearing the first trimester, given her condition's complications. The child who would become Lyra, brilliant, healthy Lyra, whose existence defied every dire prediction Garrick's family had made about Amara's ability to bear children. The irony wasn't lost on her that Garrick's suitable second wife had produced a child with exactly the condition he had rejected in Amara. Whatever genetic factor was involved, it had clearly been present in Garrick's DNA all along, not hers. Morning arrived too quickly, finding Amara carefully selecting her outfit with the precision of someone who had spent a lifetime being judged for her appearance. The charcoal gray dress was both professional and flattering, designed to complement her naturally slim frame rather than disguise it. She was done hiding, done apologizing for a body that was simply built differently. "Are you nervous about seeing Emery's dad again?" Lyra asked perceptively as they drove to the cafe. At 12, she had developed an uncanny ability to read her mother's moods. "What makes you ask that?" Amara hedged, surprised by the question. "You're wearing your important meeting dress, and you've checked your lipstick 3 times at stoplights," Lyra observed with a matter-of-fact tone that reminded Amara so much of Garrick. "Plus, you got all weird when you saw him yesterday." Amara sighed. She had always been honest with Lyra, within age-appropriate boundaries. "Yes, I am a bit nervous. Mr. Thornfield and I knew each other a long time ago." "Knew each other before I was born?" "Yes." "Were you friends?" Amara hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "We were more than friends for a while, but we had a falling out before you were born." "Is he?" Lyra trailed off, uncharacteristically hesitant. "Is he what, honey?" "Nothing." Lyra turned to look out the window, suddenly fascinated by the passing scenery. Amara felt a pang of guilt. Lyra had stopped asking about her father years ago, accepting the carefully crafted explanation that he wasn't able to be part of their lives. Now, with Garrick's sudden reappearance, those unasked questions hung in the air between them. That was a conversation for another day, Amara decided. One revelation at a time. Meridian Cafe was busy with its usual weekend crowd when they arrived. Garrick and Emery were already seated at a corner table, 2 untouched cups waiting alongside their own. Garrick rose as they approached, his impeccable manners unchanged by the years. "Thank you for coming," he said, his tone carefully neutral as he pulled out chairs for both Amara and Lyra. "I took the liberty of ordering your usual almond milk latte with an extra shot." The fact that he remembered her coffee preference after 12 years struck Amara momentarily silent. Such a small detail, yet somehow significant. "You remember that?" she asked before she could stop herself. Something flickered in his eyes. Regret, perhaps, or nostalgia. "I remember everything, Amara." The simple statement carried weight beyond the words themselves, creating a moment of tension that was broken by Emery's eager voice. "Miss Curry, I brought my research notes to show you," he said, pushing a meticulously organized binder across the table. "Lyra said you might have some insights about managing MAD that aren't in the standard medical literature." Amara turned her attention to the boy, grateful for the distraction from Garrick's intense gaze. "I'd be happy to look at your research, Emery. And please, call me Amara." As she began reviewing Emery's surprisingly sophisticated notes, the children fell into easy conversation about their shared classes and interests, creating a strange facsimile of family harmony that made Amara acutely uncomfortable. Your nutritional approach is fascinating, Garrick commented, indicating Emery's notes. Focusing on metabolic timing rather than caloric volume. Emery's doctors have been reluctant to fully embrace it. Medical orthodoxy changes slowly, Amara replied, professional interest momentarily overriding personal history. Most physicians still treat MAD as a simple matter of increasing caloric intake, which actually exacerbates the metabolic cascade in type 2 cases. That's what I've been trying to explain. Emery interjected, his face lighting up at finding someone who understood. When they make me eat those high-calorie supplements on a fixed schedule, I feel worse, not better. Because your body can't process them efficiently within the standard metabolic window, Amara explained, automatically shifting into the educational tone she used with her patients. With type 2 MAD, your body's metabolic rhythms are desynchronized from standard patterns. You need to eat according to your own body's unique timing, not by the clock. That's exactly what I experience, Emery said, his expression a mixture of relief and validation. But the doctors keep saying I'm just being difficult. They said the same about me, Amara admitted, feeling an unexpected connection with this boy who shared her condition. That's why I eventually became a nutritionist, to develop protocols based on actual patient experience rather than outdated textbook approaches. Could you help me create a personalized timing schedule? Emery asked hopefully. Dad's hired 3 different nutritionists, but none of them really understand MAD the way you do. The request placed Amara in a difficult position. Professionally, she couldn't refuse to help a child with her condition, especially one so clearly struggling under inappropriate medical management. Personally, it would mean ongoing interaction with Garrick, something she had deliberately avoided for 12 years. I'd need your current medical records, detailed metabolic panels, and your father's permission, she said carefully, glancing at Garrick. You have it, he said immediately. Whatever Emery needs. I'll have his records sent to your office today. You know where my office is? Amara raised an eyebrow. Curry Metabolic Nutrition on Chestnut Street, Garrick replied without hesitation. Your practice has an excellent reputation. Dad researches everything, Emery explained with the eye roll only preteens can perfect. He has files on all the top MAD specialists globally. Which is how I knew your mother's protocols were revolutionary, Garrick added, his gaze meeting Amara's, even before I realized they were developed by the same woman who once tried to explain her condition to me while I was too arrogant to listen. The frank admission of his past failure hung in the air between them, creating a moment of uncomfortable silence. Mom's the best, Lyra said proudly, breaking the tension. She's helped lots of people with MAD live normal lives. I have no doubt, Garrick replied, his expression serious as he looked at Amara. Which is why I'm hoping she might be willing to help Emery despite the complicated history between us. I'll review his case, Amara said finally. For Emery's sake, not yours. That's all I can ask. Garrick's relief was palpable. Thank you. The conversation shifted to safer topics. The children's school projects, their shared interest in science, the upcoming regional academic competition both would be participating in. Throughout it all, Amara observed the dynamic between Garrick and his son with professional interest and personal confusion. This was not the same man who had dismissed her medical condition as an inconvenience to his family's expectations. The way he attentively monitored Emery's energy levels, the small protein snack he produced at precisely the moment the boy's focus began to wane, the gentle encouragement when Emery expressed frustration with his body's limitations, all spoke of a father who had educated himself thoroughly about MAD and adapted his parenting accordingly. You've learned a lot about metabolic timing, she observed during a moment when the children were distracted by Lyra's tablet. I had to, Garrick replied simply. After Emery's diagnosis, I realized how catastrophically wrong I'd been about everything. After Emery's diagnosis. 12 years is a long time to have an epiphany. The universe has a particular sense of humor, he acknowledged with a grimace. Teaching me about MAD by giving my son the same condition I once. He trailed off, glancing at the children. The same condition you once found too inconvenient in a wife, Amara finished for him, keeping her voice low but allowing the bitterness to surface. The condition that made me unsuitable as a Thornfield mother. I was wrong, Garrick said, his voice equally quiet but intense. Monumentally, unforgivably wrong. Influenced by family prejudices I should have questioned, medical opinions I should have challenged, and my own shallow values. The raw honesty in his admission caught Amara off guard. The Garrick she remembered had been confident to the point of arrogance, never admitting fault or questioning his judgments once made. What happened with your second marriage? The question slipped out before she could reconsider its appropriateness. Garrick's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Celeste left shortly after Emery's diagnosis. She wasn't prepared for a child with special medical needs, especially one with a condition that. He hesitated. That carries such visible stigma, Amara finished, understanding immediately. People with MAD were often subjected to whispers about eating disorders, neglect, or other fabricated explanations for their thinness. Yes. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was suddenly facing the same prejudices I once perpetuated. His gaze was direct, unflinching in its self-assessment. By then, I'd already started following your research, though I didn't immediately make the connection that Dr. Curry was the same woman I had so grievously wronged. When did you realize? About a year ago, when your journal article included a brief biographical note mentioning your personal experience with type 2 MAD. The timing aligned too perfectly to be coincidence. And you didn't contact me then? Amara asked, genuinely curious. What right did I have? Garrick's response was simple but laden with meaning. I judged you, rejected you for the very condition I was now desperately trying to understand for my son's sake. The hypocrisy was overwhelming. Before she could respond, Lyra tugged at her sleeve. Mom, can Emery come over to our house sometime? I want to show him my microscope setup. The innocent request created another moment of awkward negotiation between the adults. Having Emery visit would inevitably mean more interaction with Garrick, something Amara was still processing. Perhaps we could start with a session at my office, she suggested as a compromise. I can evaluate Emery's metabolic patterns and show both of you some of the monitoring equipment I use. That would be amazing, Emery said enthusiastically. Dad, can we? If Miss Curry is willing to fit us into her schedule, absolutely, Garrick replied, careful to maintain the formal address despite their history. I have an opening Tuesday afternoon, Amara offered, making a mental note to rearrange her appointments. A child with MAD took priority over her discomfort with seeing Garrick again. As they prepared to leave the cafe, Amara found herself in the uncomfortable position of saying goodbye to Garrick while the children chatted a few steps away. Thank you, he said quietly. For being willing to help Emery despite everything. I wouldn't turn away any child with MAD, she replied, straightening her shoulders slightly, regardless of who their father is. I know. His gaze was steady, respectful in a way it hadn't been in their final encounters years ago. That's the kind of person you always were, the kind of person I was too blind to properly value. The simple acknowledgement of her character rather than her appearance created a confusing mixture of emotions that Amara wasn't prepared to examine. Tuesday at 3, she said instead. Bring his complete medical records. I will be there. As they drove home, Lyra was uncharacteristically quiet, staring out the window with a thoughtful expression that usually preceded a difficult question. Mom, she finally ventured. Is Mr. Thornfield my father? The question Amara had been dreading since the moment she saw Garrick across the auditorium hung in the air between them. She had never lied to Lyra about having a father who was not part of their lives, but had kept the details vague, age-appropriate, and focused on Lyra's well-being rather than the painful truth. What makes you ask that? She hedged, buying time to formulate a response. I'm not a baby anymore, Mom, Lyra said with the exasperated tone of a preteen who feels their intelligence is being underestimated. I've seen pictures of him in business magazines. We have the same eyes, the same way of tilting our heads when we're thinking. And you got all weird when you saw him yesterday. Amara sighed, realizing that her brilliant daughter had already pieced together the truth. Yes, Lyra. Garrick Thornfield is your biological father. Why didn't he want me? The question was direct, painful in its simplicity. It's complicated, honey. He didn't know about you when he left. Why didn't you tell him? By the time I confirmed my pregnancy, our divorce was already in process, Amara explained carefully. He had made it very clear he didn't want a life with me. Because you have mad. Lyra's perceptiveness was sometimes startling. That was part of it, yes. His family had very specific ideas about what a Thornfield wife should be. But that's stupid, Lyra said with the straightforward moral clarity of youth. You can't help having mad, and it doesn't make you a bad mom. You're the best mom. Amara felt tears threatening at her daughter's fierce defense. Thank you, sweetheart. But people's prejudices aren't always rational. Does he know now? That I'm his daughter? No, Amara admitted. I never told him. Are you going to tell him? The question hung between them, heavy with implications for all their futures. I don't know, Lyra. It's complicated. Because you're still mad at him. That's part of it, Amara acknowledged. But also because suddenly learning you have a 12-year-old daughter is a big thing. It would change his life and ours too. But Emery is my half-brother, Lyra said, the realization dawning in her expression. We should know each other as siblings, shouldn't we? The innocent logic of her daughter's question struck Amara deeply. Whatever her personal feelings about Garrick, the children were connected by blood. Did she have the right to keep that knowledge from them? Or from him? Let me think about it, okay? This is all very sudden for me too. Lyra nodded, accepting this answer for now, though Amara suspected the subject was far from closed. Her daughter had inherited the Thornfield determination alongside their distinctive eye color. The weekend passed in a blur of routine activities, though Amara's mind kept returning to the unexpected complications that had entered their carefully ordered lives. By Monday morning, she had made a decision, not about revealing Lyra's paternity, but about how to handle Emery's case professionally despite the personal history involved. At her clinic, she pulled Emery's file the moment it arrived by courier, reviewing the extensive medical history with growing concern. The boy's condition was being severely mismanaged by physicians who clearly didn't understand the nuances of type 2 MAD. The treatment protocols were outdated, focusing on caloric volume rather than metabolic timing, and several medications had been prescribed that were known to exacerbate the condition's symptoms. She was making notes for a complete protocol revision when her receptionist announced an unexpected visitor. Mr. Thornfield is here to see you, Dr. Curry. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important. Amara hesitated, tempted to refuse the unscheduled visit on principle, but professional curiosity about Emery's case won out over personal reluctance. Send him in. Garrick entered her office with none of his usual corporate confidence, looking uncharacteristically disheveled, as if he'd come straight from a difficult situation without taking time to compose himself. I apologize for arriving without an appointment, he began, but Emery had an episode this morning. His school called me to pick him up. Concern immediately overrode Amara's personal reservations. What kind of episode? Where is he now? Metabolic crash. He's with my assistant in the waiting room. Resting. Garrick ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of stress Amara remembered from their past. The school nurse tried to follow his official protocol, protein shake, glucose monitoring, rest, but he only got worse. Because that protocol is fundamentally flawed for his condition, Amara said, rising from her desk. Bring him in immediately. I need to evaluate him. Minutes later, Emery was reclining on the examination couch in her office, his thin frame even more fragile in his current state. Amara conducted a quick but thorough assessment, her trained eye noting the classic signs of metabolic cascade failure. His current protocol is actively harmful, she told Garrick bluntly as she prepared a specialized nutrient solution. Whoever designed it doesn't understand type 2 MAD at all. It was created by the top metabolic specialist at Stanford Children's, Garrick replied, his expression grim. The same doctor who once told me your condition made you an unsuitable candidate for motherhood. The revelation landed like a physical blow. Dr. Harrington. He's treating Emery. Until today, Garrick said firmly. I've followed their protocols for 2 years despite my growing concerns because they were the experts. But seeing you with Lyra, living proof that everything Harrington told me was wrong, and now watching Emery suffer under their care. He shook his head, anger evident in his usually controlled demeanor. I'm done with their approach. Emery needs a complete protocol revision, Amara said, professional focus overriding the complex emotions Garrick's words had stirred. Starting with immediate metabolic stabilization. She helped Emery sit up enough to sip the solution she'd prepared, explaining each step to both father and son with the clear, direct communication style that had made her practice so successful. This doesn't taste terrible, Emery commented with surprise after his first cautious sip. Because they're designed for different metabolic conditions, Amara explained. Standard nutritional supplements are formulated for maximum caloric density. You need specifically timed nutrient combinations that work with your metabolic patterns, not against them. As she continued treating Emery, Amara was acutely aware of Garrick watching her work, not with the dismissive skepticism he'd shown toward her condition years ago, but with attentive respect. It was disorienting to see this reversal, this apparent transformation in the man who had once found her medical needs too inconvenient to accommodate in his life plan. You're already feeling better, aren't you? She asked Emery after 20 minutes of her specialized protocol. The boy nodded, color returning to his pale face. Way better. Like, immediately better. That's because we're working with your body's natural rhythm rather than fighting it. She turned to Garrick. He needs a completely new approach. I can design it, but implementing it will require significant changes to his daily routine, medication schedule, and nutritional intake. Whatever he needs, Garrick said without hesitation. I'll make it happen. It won't be easy. Schools, other doctors, even family members often resist these protocols because they don't align with conventional wisdom about nutrition. I don't care about conventional wisdom, Garrick replied with an intensity that surprised her. I care about my son's health. The vehemence in his voice, so different from his dismissive attitude toward her own condition years ago, created another ripple of confusion in Amara's carefully maintained emotional distance. I'll need to conduct a full metabolic assessment, she said, focusing on practical next steps. That means monitoring Emery over several days to establish his unique patterns. Normally, I'd do this through a series of appointments, but given the severity of his condition and the harmful protocols he's been following, I'd recommend an intensive approach. Whatever you think is best, Garrick agreed immediately. I could monitor him through a complete cycle if, Amara hesitated, the professional recommendation warring with personal boundaries. If he stayed with us for a few days. My home office has the necessary equipment for continuous monitoring. The suggestion surprised even her as she made it, crossing a line she'd carefully maintained between her professional and personal lives. But Emery's condition was severe enough to warrant extraordinary measures, and the boy's earnest desire to understand his body resonated with her own childhood struggles. You would do that? Garrick asked, clearly caught off guard by the offer. For Emery? Yes, Amara met his gaze directly. No child should suffer with MAD because of adult prejudices or outdated medical approaches. I've dedicated my career to changing that reality. Thank you, Garrick said simply, the two words carrying more weight than any elaborate expression of gratitude could have. Could Lyra be there too? Emery asked hopefully, his energy clearly returning as the metabolic stabilization took effect. She said she'd help me with my science project. Lyra lives with me, so yes, she'd be there, Amara explained, a small smile forming despite herself at the boy's enthusiasm. Though you'd be there for medical monitoring, not just a social visit. I understand, Emery assured her with the serious expression of a child accustomed to medical discussions. But it would be nice to have a friend who doesn't think all my monitoring and special food is weird. The simple statement, reflecting the social isolation many children with medical conditions experienced, cemented Amara's decision. Whatever complicated history existed between her and Garrick, Emery deserved the best care possible and the chance to connect with someone who understood his struggles. "We could start tomorrow after school," she suggested. 3 days of continuous monitoring should give us enough data to create a comprehensive protocol. "I'll arrange it with his school," Garrick confirmed. "And I can have his things delivered to your home." An awkward silence followed as both adults realized the domestic arrangements would require further negotiation. "You don't need to stay," Amara said quickly, addressing the unspoken question. "I'm fully qualified to monitor him overnight." "I appreciate that, but I wouldn't feel right leaving him entirely," Garrick replied carefully. "Perhaps I could stay nearby. The hotel on Maple Street is just a few blocks from your address." The fact that he knew her home location was another reminder of how much research he'd apparently done. Rather than feeling invaded, however, Amara found herself recognizing the parental concern behind his knowledge. "That would be fine," she agreed. "You can participate in the daytime monitoring and assessments." As they finalized the arrangements, Amara found herself in the strange position of planning to temporarily share custody of Garrick's son while still concealing the fact that he had a daughter living in her home. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on her. "Does Lyra know about me?" Garrick asked suddenly, as if reading her thoughts. "That we were once married?" "She figured it out," Amara admitted. "She's observant, and you two share some distinctive features." "Does she know I'm her?" He stopped abruptly, the question hanging incomplete between them. Amara's heart raced as she tried to determine how much he had guessed. "Her what?" "Her mother's ex-husband," Garrick finished, though something in his expression suggested he'd considered a different ending to that sentence. "Yes, she knows we were married before she was born," Amara confirmed, relief mingling with a strange disappointment that he hadn't asked the more significant question. The moment passed, and they returned to discussing Emery's care plan. By the time they left her office, Emery was noticeably improved, walking with more energy and color in his cheeks than when he'd arrived. "I'll see you both tomorrow after school," Amara said as they prepared to leave. "And Emery, start keeping notes about how you feel at different times of day. The more data we have, the better we can customize your protocol." "I will," the boy promised eagerly. "Thank you, Dr. Curry. No one's ever explained my condition in a way that made sense before." "Call me Amara," she reminded him gently. "And living with MAD can make perfect sense once you understand your body's unique patterns. It's not a defect, it's just a different way of processing energy." The validation in her words, so contrary to the medical stigma both had experienced, created visible relief in the boy's expression. Garrick, watching this exchange, had an unreadable look in his eyes, perhaps regret for the similar validation he had failed to offer Amara years ago. As they left, Amara found herself facing an unexpected complication in her carefully constructed life. Tomorrow, Garrick Thornfield would be entering her home, the sanctuary she had built for herself and Lyra after the devastation of their marriage, and with him would come all the unresolved history, the unanswered questions, and the secret she had kept for 12 years. That the daughter he had never known existed was about to become temporary housemates with the son he had fought so hard to protect. If this story of unexpected reunions and karmic ironies has captured your interest, please like this video and subscribe for more tales of second chances and life-changing encounters. In our next part, we'll discover whether Amara reveals the truth about Lyra's paternity, how Garrick reacts to discovering he has a daughter he never knew existed, and whether these two children, connected by blood but separated by their parents' painful history, can become the bridge that heals old wounds. Sometimes life brings us full circle to face the very judgments we once passed on others, and second chances arrive in the most unexpected packages. Tuesday afternoon arrived with a nervous energy pervading Amara's typically serene household. She had spent the morning preparing her home office with the specialized monitoring equipment needed for Emery's assessment, while simultaneously trying to explain the situation to Lyra. A conversation complicated by revelations still withheld. So Emery's staying with us for 3 days, Lyra confirmed as she helped Amara arrange the guest room. And Mr. Thornfield will be here during the day. That's right. Emery needs comprehensive metabolic monitoring, and this is the most efficient way to gather the data. Amara smoothed the bedspread with more attention than necessary, avoiding her daughter's perceptive gaze. It's a professional arrangement. But he's also my half-brother, Lyra pointed out with the direct logic that often caught Amara off guard. And Mr. Thornfield is my biological father. So it's not just professional, is it? Amara sighed, sitting on the edge of the freshly made bed. No, it's not just professional. It's complicated. Are you going to tell Mr. Thornfield about me? The question hung between them, weighty with 12 years of carefully maintained secrets. I don't know yet, Amara admitted honestly. This situation with Emery happened so suddenly. I need time to figure out the right approach. But if you don't tell him, and I don't tell him, and we all just pretend we're not related while living in the same house for 3 days. Lyra's brow furrowed with the ethical dilemma. Isn't that lying? The moral clarity of her 12-year-old daughter sometimes left Amara without adequate responses. It's not that simple, honey. There are consequences to revelations this significant for all of us, including Emery. I think Emery would be happy to know he has a sister, Lyra said with confidence. He told me he always wanted siblings. It's not just about whether the news would make him happy in the moment. It's about how it might change everyone's lives going forward. And about the fact that your father has been absent for 12 years, not by his choice perhaps, but absent nonetheless. Because he didn't know about me, Lyra reminded her, which isn't the same as choosing to be absent. Amara was saved from further ethical debate by the doorbell announcing their guest's arrival. Taking a steadying breath, she went to welcome Emery and Garrick into the home she had built specifically as a sanctuary from the painful memories associated with the Thornfield name. Emery entered with the combination of excitement and nervous energy typical of preteens in new situations, clutching a duffel bag and immediately noticing Lyra. Hi. Your mom's going to help figure out my metabolic patterns, he explained unnecessarily, clearly having rehearsed the explanation. Dad says she's the best mad specialist in the country. Garrick followed more tentatively, his usual corporate confidence noticeably muted as he took in the warm, tastefully decorated home. Thank you again for doing this, he said to Amara, handing her a folder. These are the medication schedules and emergency contact information you requested. We'll get Emery settled in the guest room first, Amara replied, maintaining a professional tone despite the surreal domestic situation unfolding in her living room. Lyra can show you where to put your things, she added to Emery. As the children disappeared down the hallway, an awkward silence descended between the adults. Garrick glanced around the living room, his gaze lingering on family photos, mostly of Amara and Lyra in various locations, carefully curated to never suggest the presence of a missing father. You've built a beautiful home, he said finally. Thank you, Amara's response was polite but reserved. The monitoring equipment is set up in my home office. We'll start with a baseline assessment once Emery's settled. Amara. The use of her first name, something he'd largely avoided in their recent interactions, caught her attention. I know how strange this must be for you. Having us in your home after everything. I want you to know I appreciate it, and I understand how difficult it must be. The simple acknowledgement of the awkwardness caught her off guard. The Garrick she remembered had been less attuned to others' emotional discomfort, particularly when focused on a goal. It's for Emery, she said, defaulting to the explanation that allowed her to maintain emotional distance. No child should suffer with MAD because of adult complications. Still, thank you. His gratitude seemed genuine, without the entitlement that had often colored his interactions during their marriage. Before the conversation could continue, the children returned, Emery chattering excitedly about the telescope he'd spotted in Lyra's room. Lyra says you can see Jupiter's moons with it, he told Garrick. Can we try it while I'm here? If Miss Curry approves, and if it doesn't interfere with your monitoring schedule, Garrick replied, deferring to Amara's authority in her home, another unexpected adjustment from the man who had once made unilateral decisions without consultation. We can certainly incorporate it, Amara said, unable to deny the children this shared interest. Astronomy actually pairs well with metabolic monitoring. Both involve tracking patterns and cycles. The first day of monitoring proceeded with a structured precision that helped maintain appropriate boundaries. Amara conducted her assessment with professional detachment, explaining each step to both Emery and Garrick, while Lyra occasionally assisted with equipment she'd grown up seeing in her mother's home office. Your metabolic rhythm shows a classic type 2 MAD pattern, Amara explained as they reviewed the initial data that evening. But it's been disrupted by the inappropriate protocols you've been following. We need to reset your system by working with your natural cycle rather than fighting it. That's what I've been trying to tell the doctors, Emery said with the frustrated tone of someone who'd gone unheard too often. But they keep saying I'm just being non-compliant when their supplements make me feel worse. Unfortunately, that's a common experience for people with MAD, Amara acknowledged. Medical training often prioritizes standardized approaches over individualized responses, especially with conditions that aren't fully understood. It's why we sought your expertise specifically, Garrick added, his attention focused on the monitoring data displayed on Amara's computer. Your research emphasizes personalized metabolic timing over generic caloric increases. The fact that he had read and understood her research created another ripple of confusion in Amara's carefully maintained professional demeanor. This Garrick, thoughtfully engaged with medical nuances he had once dismissed, seemed almost a different person from the man who had found her condition too inconvenient to accommodate in his life plans. As evening approached, bringing with it the awkward transition of Garrick's departure to his hotel while Emery remained, Lyra suggested dinner together, an innocent proposition weighted with complicated implications. We could order from Jade Garden, she proposed. They have those protein-balanced dishes Mom always gets when she's monitoring her metabolic timing. That sounds perfect, Garrick agreed before Amara could formulate a polite decline, if it's not imposing too much on your routine. The consideration in the question, acknowledging her home, her schedule, her authority, was another small indicator of apparent change that Amara found disorienting. 12 years ago, Garrick Thornfield had not been a man who hesitated to impose his preferences or considered how his decisions might disrupt others' routines. It's fine, she conceded, recognizing that maintaining a completely detached professional relationship was increasingly unrealistic given the circumstances. Their menu does offer excellent options for MAD-friendly meals. Dinner became an unexpectedly pleasant affair, with the children's natural enthusiasm creating a buffer against the complex emotions circulating between the adults. Emery and Lyra discovered shared interests beyond science, fantasy literature, strategy games, and a mutual dislike of their school's physical education program. Coach Briner makes us run laps even when I've explained that my metabolic condition means I need modified activity, Emery complained. He thinks I'm just making excuses. He does the same thing to Mom when she volunteers, Lyra added, apparently not noticing how this casual revelation created a sharp look of interest from Garrick. Tells her she just needs to eat a sandwich instead of understanding MAD. You volunteer at their school? Garrick asked, turning to Amara with genuine curiosity. Occasionally, she acknowledged. I give presentations on metabolic health and nutrition. It helps reduce stigma for students with conditions like MAD. That's remarkable, Garrick said after a moment. Using your personal experience to educate others and create a more inclusive environment. The sincere admiration in his tone, so different from the carefully concealed embarrassment he'd once shown regarding her condition in social situations, created another small crack in Amara's emotional defenses. It's necessary, she replied simply. Children with metabolic differences face enough challenges without adding ignorance from authority figures. The conversation shifted to Emery's experiences at school, providing safer territory than the increasingly personal observations threatening to surface. By the time Garrick prepared to leave for his hotel, a tentative routine had been established, one that felt unexpectedly natural despite the extraordinary circumstances. I'll be back tomorrow morning at 8, he told Emery as they said goodnight. Follow all of Miss Curry's instructions, and call me immediately if you need anything. I will, Dad, Emery promised. But I already feel better just following her timing schedule instead of Dr. Harrington's. I'm not surprised, Garrick replied with a respectful glance toward Amara. We should have sought Miss Curry's expertise much sooner. After Garrick left, the household settled into evening routines. Emery connected to monitoring equipment that would track his metabolic patterns throughout the night, while Lyra worked on homework under Amara's supervision. The domestic scene might have appeared ordinary to an outside observer, belying the extraordinary circumstances that had created it. Later, after both children were asleep, Amara sat at her kitchen table, reviewing Emery's preliminary data and confronting the moral dilemma that had been weighing on her since the unexpected reunion at the parent-teacher night. Lyra's straightforward ethical assessment that withholding her paternity from Garrick constituted a form of lying had struck closer to home than Amara wanted to admit. For 12 years, she had justified her silence as protection for Lyra, for herself, for the life they had carefully built together. The Garrick she had divorced would have disrupted that life with his rigid expectations, family prejudices, and conditional acceptance. But the man who had spent the day in her home, attentively learning about his son's condition, and respectfully navigating their complicated history, seemed markedly different from that memory. The question haunted her as she finally sought sleep: was she protecting Lyra from Garrick, or protecting herself from the vulnerability of allowing him back into their lives in any capacity? Morning arrived with the distinctive sound of children's laughter, a rare occurrence in the typically quiet household. Following the sound to the kitchen, Amara found a scene that momentarily stopped her in the doorway. Emery and Lyra were collaborating on breakfast preparation, their movements displaying the easy synchronization of siblings despite having known each other only a short time. Mom! Lyra noticed her first. Emery's showing me how to make protein pancakes that work with mad timing. They actually taste good. Much better than the ones the nutritionist gave me, Emery added, carefully flipping a perfectly golden pancake. I added cinnamon and vanilla, which helps with the weird aftertaste from the protein powder. That's a good modification, Amara acknowledged, moving into the kitchen and noting the precise measurements and organized workspace, traits she recognized from both her own approach and, admittedly, Garrick's methodical nature. How are you feeling this morning, Emery? Better than I have in months, he replied enthusiastically. Following your timing schedule for my evening medication made a huge difference. I actually slept through the night without waking up feeling sick. The simple validation of her approach, something mainstream medicine had often denied, created a moment of professional satisfaction that temporarily overshadowed the personal complications of the situation. The overnight monitoring data confirms what you're feeling, she told him, checking the tablet that received wireless updates from his monitors. Your metabolic pattern stabilized around midnight and maintained a much healthier rhythm than what I observed yesterday. See, I told Dad your methods would work better, Emery said with the satisfaction of a child proven right. He researched all your papers after I was diagnosed, but my doctors kept saying their protocols were more established. This casual revelation created another ripple in Amara's understanding of the past 12 years. The image of Garrick researching her work, seeking answers for his son's condition and the expertise of the woman he had once rejected for the same condition, added another layer of complexity to her already conflicted emotions. Their morning routine was interrupted by Garrick's arrival precisely at 8 as promised, carrying a laptop bag and a small box from a local bakery. I brought breakfast, but I see you've beaten me to it, he observed, taking in the domestic scene with an expression Amara couldn't quite interpret. Those pancakes look far better than anything I could have purchased. Emery made them, Lyra informed him. They're special mad-friendly protein pancakes. You can still have one though, they taste normal. The casual inclusion, Lyra offering food to the father she knew but he didn't know he was, created a moment of tension that only Amara recognized, but Garrick simply accepted the offered plate with thanks, complimenting Emery on his culinary skills while settling at the kitchen table as if family breakfasts in Amara's home were a routine occurrence. The day progressed with continued metabolic monitoring interspersed with the children's schoolwork and occasional breaks to prevent Emery from becoming overly fatigued. Throughout it all, Amara observed the growing connection between Lyra and Emery with both professional interest and personal concern. They've bonded quickly, Garrick noted quietly during a moment when the children were engrossed in a complex board game in the living room. Emery hasn't connected with a peer like this before. His condition often creates barriers. Lyra understands medical differences better than most children her age, Amara replied. Growing up with a mother who has MAD gave her a different perspective. You've raised an extraordinary daughter, Garrick said, his gaze lingering on Lyra with an expression that seemed to hold questions he wasn't yet consciously forming. She has remarkable emotional intelligence alongside her academic abilities. The comment, so close to acknowledging the truth neither of them had directly addressed, hung between them for a moment before Amara redirected the conversation to safer territory. Emery is making excellent progress. His metabolic patterns are already showing significant improvement just from the timing adjustments we've implemented. The professional discussion provided temporary refuge from the personal revelations hovering at the periphery of their interactions. But as the second day of monitoring continued, Amara found herself increasingly aware of Garrick's attention to Lyra, not merely polite interest in his son's new friend, but a more focused observation, as if trying to reconcile something just beyond his conscious understanding. That evening, after the children had again persuaded the adults to share dinner together, the inevitable questions began to surface. It started innocuously enough with conversation about school projects and activities, until Garrick asked a question that created a moment of frozen silence. Lyra, you mentioned your science project on genetic inheritance patterns. That's an advanced topic for your grade level. Has that always been an interest of yours? Lyra, unaware of the conversational minefield, nodded enthusiastically. Ever since I was little. Mom says I was asking about DNA before most kids knew the alphabet. She has a natural aptitude for genetic concepts, Amara interjected, trying to guide the conversation away from dangerous territory. Her teachers have always commented on it. It runs in families, you know, Lyra added innocently. Genetic aptitudes, I mean. Like how Emery and I are both good at math and science. It's probably because. Lyra, could you help me get dessert ready? Amara interrupted, perhaps too abruptly, judging by the curious look Garrick gave her. Safely out of earshot in the kitchen, she gave her daughter a meaningful look. We need to be careful about certain topics right now. But Mom, he's going to figure it out eventually, Lyra whispered back. I look like him. I have his exact same eyebrow thing when I'm thinking hard. And we both tilt our heads the same way when we're solving problems. Emery's already noticed. Emery noticed what? Amara asked, alarm rising. He said I remind him of his dad sometimes. The way I analyze things. Lyra's expression was sympathetic beyond her years. It's getting weird pretending, Mom. The simple truth in her daughter's assessment hit Amara with unexpected force. It was getting weird, this elaborate dance around a truth that was becoming increasingly obvious with every shared meal, every observed interaction, every casual revelation of shared traits and interests. Let me handle this my way, she requested, though with less conviction than she might have had days earlier. The timing needs to be right. When they returned to the dining room, Garrick was showing Emery something on his phone, photographs, based on the way they were swiping through images. Both looked up as Amara and Lyra approached with dessert. Dad's showing me pictures of his science fair project from when he was my age, Emery explained. He built a spectral analysis device that could identify mineral compositions. That sounds impressive, Amara commented, setting down the dessert bowls. It was derivative, Garrick corrected modestly. Just an application of established principles. Nothing like the original research you're both doing. Can I see? Lyra asked, her curiosity overriding the caution Amara had just impressed upon her. As Garrick handed her the phone, Amara felt a flutter of anxiety. The childhood photos might lead to more dangerous conversational territory, comparisons, observations of similarities, questions about Lyra's parentage that she wasn't yet prepared to address. You look exactly the same, Lyra observed, swiping through the images. Except for the glasses. Do you still need them? Laser surgery in my 20s, Garrick explained. Best investment I ever made. I might need glasses soon, Lyra continued conversationally. Mom says eye issues often develop around my age, especially if there's a family history. The casual comment created another moment of tension that only Amara recognized, though she noticed Garrick's expression shift slightly, a subtle narrowing of his eyes, a thoughtful tilt of his head that suggested connections forming just below conscious recognition. Do eye problems run in your family? He asked Lyra. The question seemingly innocent but weighted with potential revelations. On my father's side, I think, Lyra replied, glancing briefly at Amara. Mom says I might have inherited that tendency. Before the conversation could progress further into dangerous territory, Amara deliberately redirected it to Emery's monitoring schedule for the final day. The tactical shift worked temporarily, but she recognized that the carefully maintained separation between past and present was becoming increasingly unsustainable. Later that night, after Garrick had departed for his hotel and the children were asleep, Amara found herself once again at her kitchen table. This time with a cup of herbal tea and the moral weight of 12 years of choices pressing down upon her. The day had brought too many near revelations, too many moments where the truth had almost emerged through innocent comments and observed similarities. Her phone lit up with a text message from Garrick. Emery is happier than I've seen him in years. Your approach is already making a significant difference. I can't thank you enough for what you're doing for him, and for how welcoming you've been despite our history. The simple gratitude, free from the entitlement she might have expected from the man she divorced, created another small erosion in her protective barriers. Before she could reconsider, she found herself typing a response. He's a remarkable child, bright, resilient, eager to understand his condition rather than be limited by it. You've done well with him, especially navigating a diagnosis that must have been complicated, given our past. His reply came quickly, more than complicated. It was a brutal cosmic lesson in empathy and regret. Watching Emery struggle with the same condition I once judged you for has been the most profound education of my life. The raw honesty in his message caught her off guard. This level of self-awareness, of acknowledged wrongdoing, was so far removed from the Garrick she had known that it created a moment of cognitive dissonance. People didn't change this fundamentally, did they? Especially not men like Garrick Thornfield, whose certainty in his own judgments had once been unshakable. Before she could formulate a response, another message appeared. I know this is overdue by 12 years, but I am deeply, profoundly sorry for how I treated you, Amara. For the ignorance, the prejudice, the failure to stand by you when you needed support. There is no excuse for it, and I don't expect forgiveness. But you should know that I recognize the magnitude of my failure, both as a husband and as a human being. The unexpected apology, so direct, so unqualified by excuses or explanations, left Amara staring at her phone in shock. 12 years of anger, of protective bitterness, had been premised on the certainty that Garrick Thornfield would never recognize the cruelty of his actions, never understand the depth of pain he had caused. Yet here was evidence to the contrary. Not public, performative remorse, but a private acknowledgement sent at midnight with no audience but her. It felt genuine in a way that challenged her long-held narrative. After several minutes of internal debate, she replied simply. Thank you for saying that. It matters even 12 years later. Setting down her phone, Amara confronted the truth she had been avoiding since their unexpected reunion. The moral equation had changed. The Garrick who had divorced her for her medical condition, influenced by family prejudice and medical misinformation, seemed genuinely different from the man who was now fighting to properly support his son through the same condition. The father who had never known about Lyra was not the same as a father who had abandoned her. The question that had seemed so clear just days ago, whether to reveal Lyra's paternity, now felt muddied by these revelations of change, of growth, of acknowledged wrongdoing. What was truly in Lyra's best interest? Protection from a father who might reject her? Or connection with a father who seemed to have evolved beyond the man who had rejected her mother? Sleep eluded Amara that night, these questions circling in her mind without resolution. By morning, she had made no firm decision beyond a recognition that the current situation, pretending there was no biological connection between Garrick and Lyra while living in increasingly domestic proximity, was becoming untenable. The final day of Emery's monitoring began with the now established routine of shared breakfast, data review, and collaborative planning between medical assessment and the children's educational activities. Amara noted with professional satisfaction that Emery's metabolic patterns had stabilized significantly, providing clear evidence for the personalized protocol she was developing. The difference is remarkable, Garrick observed as they reviewed the 3-day comparison charts in her home office. His patterns are already normalizing just from following your timing-based approach. The body knows what it needs, Amara explained. With type 2 MAD, the challenge isn't increasing caloric intake but synchronizing nutrition with metabolic windows of opportunity. Emery's system was fighting the standardized protocol because it worked against his natural rhythm. Just as yours did, Garrick said quietly, which I failed to understand or respect. The direct acknowledgement of their shared history, brought into the professional discussion without prompting, created another moment of unexpected connection. Before Amara could respond, however, a crash from the living room interrupted their conversation. They rushed out to find Lyra kneeling beside Emery, who had collapsed on the floor, his monitoring equipment displaying alarming metrics. He just fell, Lyra explained, her voice tight with worry. We were just playing chess, and he suddenly got really pale and fell over. Amara's professional training took over immediately as she knelt beside Emery, checking his vital signs and reviewing the data on his portable monitor. Severe hypoglycemic event, she diagnosed, already reaching for the emergency kit she kept prepared. His system is overcorrecting from the previous protocol's damage. Working with practiced efficiency, she administered a specialized glucose compound designed specifically for type 2 MAD patients, monitoring his response with calm precision despite the urgency of the situation. Should we call an ambulance? Garrick asked, his usual composure fractured by paternal fear. Not yet, Amara replied, noting the first signs of improvement in Emery's readings. Standard emergency protocols would likely make his condition worse, not better. This is a predictable adjustment phase as his system rebalances. As Emery gradually regained consciousness, confused but responding well to Amara's intervention, she continued monitoring his vital signs while explaining the situation in clear, calm terms that reassured both the frightened boy and his visibly shaken father. This is actually a positive sign, she told them as Emery's color returned to normal. It means your system is resetting to its natural rhythm, rejecting the artificial patterns imposed by the previous protocol. Although it didn't feel positive, Emery said weakly, attempting humor despite his obvious exhaustion. The transition can be challenging, Amara acknowledged, helping him to the couch where he could rest more comfortably. But now we have crucial data about your recovery pattern that will help us design a more effective long-term protocol. Throughout the crisis, Lyra had remained close, assisting her mother with practiced familiarity, handing supplies before being asked, adjusting monitoring equipment, providing quiet reassurance to Emery. The seamless coordination between mother and daughter spoke of long experience with similar situations. You've done this before, Garrick observed as the immediate danger passed, watching Lyra efficiently helping Amara stabilize Emery's condition. Mom has hypoglycemic events sometimes, Lyra explained matter-of-factly. Not as often now that she's perfected her protocol, but I've been her backup since I was little. The casual revelation of Amara's vulnerability, something she had carefully concealed during their marriage, managing her condition privately rather than risk Garrick's judgment, created another shift in his understanding. His expression reflected a dawning comprehension of the challenges she had faced alone, both during their marriage and in the years since. You taught her to help you, he said quietly to Amara, because there was no one else. The simple observation, free from pity but heavy with recognition, pierced Amara unexpectedly. She needed to know what to do in an emergency, she replied, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to surface. Children with parents who have chronic conditions often become caregivers earlier than their peers. It's not a big deal, Lyra added, misinterpreting Garrick's concerned expression. Mom's really good at managing her MAD now, and teaching me about it helped me understand the science better. The crisis created a new level of intimacy between them all, the shared experience of medical emergency, of vulnerability and competence intertwined, of fear transformed into purposeful action. As Emery rested on the couch, gradually regaining his strength under Amara's careful supervision, the pretense of merely professional connection became increasingly difficult to maintain. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here, Garrick said to Amara during a quiet moment while the children were distracted by a movie Lyra had suggested to help Emery rest. Standard emergency services would have followed protocols that might have made his condition worse. That's why I developed specialized approaches for MAD emergencies, Amara replied. Too many people with our condition have been harmed by well-intentioned but inappropriate interventions. Our condition, Garrick repeated. The simple pronoun choice acknowledging a shared reality he had once denied. You've transformed what others saw as a limitation into expertise that saves lives. The genuine admiration in his voice, so different from the carefully concealed embarrassment he had once shown regarding her condition, created another small crack in Amara's emotional defenses. By evening, with Emery fully stabilized and the monitoring equipment providing comprehensive data for his customized protocol, the time approached for decisions about next steps. The 3-day assessment had technically concluded, but Emery's hypoglycemic event had created both medical reasons for continued monitoring and emotional connections that resisted simple conclusion. I'd like to keep Emery under observation for one more night, Amara suggested as they reviewed the day's data. The hypoglycemic event provides valuable information, but I want to ensure his system has fully stabilized before transitioning to a maintenance protocol. Of course, Garrick agreed immediately. Whatever you recommend. Can we have another movie night? Emery asked hopefully, looking between the adults with the universal expression of children seeking to extend an enjoyable arrangement. Lyra was going to show me her collection of science documentaries. The innocent request, so normal, so domestic, highlighted the extraordinary situation they had created. A temporary family unit composed of biological connections both acknowledged and concealed, brought together by medical necessity but evolving into something more complex. If Miss Curry approves, I don't see why not, Garrick replied, once again deferring to Amara's authority in her home. Another adjustment she was still reconciling with her memories of their marriage. That would be fine, Amara agreed, unable to deny the children this shared interest, particularly after the stress of Emery's medical episode. But monitoring continues, and proper nutrition timing needs to be maintained. The evening unfolded with a strange domesticity, dinner prepared according to MAD-appropriate timing, the children selecting documentaries from Lyra's collection, Garrick and Amara reviewing medical data while maintaining a careful distance that nonetheless felt increasingly artificial given the circumstances. As the children became absorbed in a program about quantum physics, their excited commentary suggesting they understood concepts most adults would find impenetrable, Garrick turned to Amara with an expression that signaled a shift from professional consultation to personal conversation. May I ask you something? His tone was careful, respectful of boundaries she had established. That depends on what you're asking, Amara replied, wariness returning despite the tentative trust that had developed over the past 3 days. Why did you become a metabolic specialist after everything you experienced, the prejudice, the medical dismissal, the personal rejection? The last phrase carried the weight of his own actions, acknowledged without deflection. Many people would have wanted nothing more to do with the condition that caused such pain. The unexpected question, personal yet not intrusive, curious rather than judgmental, deserved a thoughtful response. Because I didn't want other people with MAD to suffer what I did, she said simply. The isolation, the misdiagnosis, the treatment as a personal failure rather than a medical condition. Especially children. Like Emery, Garrick said quietly. Like Emery, she confirmed. Like any child born with a body that works differently from standard expectations. The unspoken inclusion of Lyra in this category, another child with MAD genetics, if not the active condition, hung between them, part of the larger truth still unacknowledged. You transformed your suffering into purpose, Garrick observed, genuine admiration evident in his voice, while I spent years building technologies that ultimately matter far less than the work you do directly with patients. The contrast he drew, not to elevate his achievements over hers as he might have done 12 years ago, but rather the opposite, created another moment of recalibration in Amara's understanding of the man before her. Different paths, different contributions, she said, the reflexive diplomacy surprising even her. Your technologies have educational applications that reach millions of students. That matters too. Perhaps, he acknowledged, though seeing your direct impact on Emery's well-being these past 3 days has been clarifying about what truly constitutes meaningful work. The conversation might have continued in this unexpectedly reflective direction had Lyra not called for their attention, eager to share an insight about the documentary that displayed both her scientific precocity and her intuitive grasp of complex concepts. "Did you hear that explanation of quantum entanglement?" she asked excitedly. "It's exactly like what we're studying in advanced science. Two particles that remain connected regardless of distance or time. Just like genetics," Emery added, making connections with his own research interests. "How traits can resurface generations later, still entangled with their origins." The innocent scientific observation carried metaphorical weight that created another moment of tension for Amara, particularly when she noticed Garrick studying Lyra with that increasingly familiar expression of puzzlement, as if trying to resolve a question not yet fully formed in his consciousness. Later, after the children had finally gone to bed, and Garrick prepared to leave for his hotel, the accumulated weight of unspoken truths and near revelations left Amara feeling increasingly dishonest. The temporary arrangement had created connections that couldn't be easily severed once the medical monitoring concluded, not between the children who had bonded as friends, nor between the adults navigating a shared past while creating an uncertain future. "Garrick," she said as he gathered his laptop and notes by the door. "There's something we need to discuss tomorrow. Something important." His expression shifted to careful attention, recognizing the significance in her tone. "Of course. Whenever you're ready." "It's about Lyra," she continued, committed now to a path she could no longer avoid, "and about why I never told you I was pregnant 12 years ago." Understanding dawned in his expression, not shock or surprise, but rather confirmation of suspicions that had been building through days of observation and interaction. "She's mine, isn't she?" he asked quietly. "My daughter?" The simple question, direct yet not accusatory, deserved an equally direct answer. "Yes," Amara confirmed. The secret of 12 years finally spoken aloud between them. "She's your biological daughter. I was 3 months pregnant when you left." Garrick absorbed this confirmation with visible emotion, not anger at the concealment, but a complex mixture of wonder and regret that suggested he had already begun to suspect the truth. "I thought so these past few days," watching her, noticing similarities, he shook his head slightly, as if clearing away confusion. "But I didn't want to presume, to make assumptions that might be unwelcome. I plan to tell you tomorrow," Amara explained, after Emery's monitoring was complete. It seemed wrong to complicate his treatment with personal revelations. "I understand," Garrick said, and remarkably, he seemed to. "Your priority was the children's well-being, as it should be. The absence of expected reactions, no demands about denied rights, no accusations about withheld knowledge, no immediate assertions of paternal authority, created another moment of recalibration in Amara's understanding of the man before her. "We should talk about this properly tomorrow," she suggested, suddenly exhausted by the weight of the revelation, "when we're both rested and can discuss it rationally." "Of course," he agreed immediately, respecting her need for space despite what must have been overwhelming emotions at the confirmation. "Thank you for telling me, Amara. It can't have been an easy decision after 12 years. "It wasn't," she acknowledged. "But Lyra deserves the truth. And so do you." As he left, the quiet dignity of his response, so different from the entitled demand she had feared, left Amara wondering once again how thoroughly a person could change when confronted with the consequences of their actions. The Garrick who had just learned he had a 12-year-old daughter seemed markedly different from the man who had once found her medical condition too inconvenient to accommodate in his life plans. Sleep came fitfully that night, her mind cycling through possible outcomes of tomorrow's inevitable conversation. By morning, Amara had reached no conclusions beyond a commitment to honesty, with Garrick, with Lyra, and perhaps most importantly, with herself about the evolving reality of their situation. Breakfast found an uncharacteristically quiet household, with Emery still recovering from his hypoglycemic episode and Lyra subdued by the weight of impending revelations she had sensed in the adult's demeanor. "Did you tell him?" she asked Amara directly when they had a moment alone in the kitchen, her perceptiveness once again cutting through pretense. "Yes," Amara confirmed. "Last night, briefly. We're going to discuss it properly today." "Is he angry?" Lyra's question revealed her underlying fear that her biological father might reject knowledge of her existence, might find her as unacceptable as he had once found her mother's condition. "No, honey," Amara assured her, pulling her daughter into a gentle embrace. "Not angry at all, just surprised, and I think regretful about the time he's missed." "Will everything change now?" The vulnerability in Lyra's question, so mature in many ways, yet still a child facing fundamental shifts in her understanding of family, reminded Amara of the emotional stakes beyond the adult complications. "Some things will change," she acknowledged honestly, "but the important things won't. You'll always be my brilliant, compassionate daughter, and I'll always be here for you, no matter what." When Garrick arrived, precisely at 8 as promised, though with a different energy about him, a contained intensity that spoke of a night spent processing life-altering information, the moment of truth could no longer be postponed. "Good morning," he greeted them all, his tone carefully modulated to maintain normality for the children's sake. "How is everyone feeling today?" "Better," Emery reported, though still pale from his episode. "Miss Curry's emergency protocol worked really well." "I'm glad to hear it," Garrick replied, his gaze moving to Lyra with new awareness, seeing her, truly seeing her as his daughter, for the first time with conscious recognition. "And how are you this morning, Lyra?" The simple question carried weight beyond its words, creating a moment of connection that transcended the 12 years of separation. Lyra, perceptive as always, recognized the shift immediately. "You know, don't you?" she asked directly, her gaze steady despite the emotion visible in her expression. "That you're my biological father." The straightforward question, so characteristic of Lyra's direct approach to complex situations, created a moment of unexpected authenticity between them. "Yes," Garrick confirmed, matching her honesty with his own. "Your mother told me last night. But you had already started to figure it out." "I had noticed similarities," he acknowledged. "Things that seemed beyond coincidence. But I didn't want to presume or intrude." The mature exchange between them, neither overly emotional nor artificially detached, reflected both Lyra's unusual poise and Garrick's careful respect for boundaries he hadn't known existed just days earlier. Emery looked between them with dawning comprehension. "Wait, Lyra is your daughter?" "Like, actually your daughter? That makes her my half-sister." The excited conclusion, jumping immediately to relationship rather than dwelling on concealment or separation, provided a moment of lightness in the emotionally charged conversation. "Yes," Garrick confirmed, glancing at Amara to ensure he wasn't overstepping. "Lyra is my biological daughter, which does indeed make you half-siblings." "That's amazing." Emery's genuine enthusiasm cut through potential awkwardness. "I've always wanted a sibling, especially one who gets science stuff like Lyra does." The children's straightforward acceptance, focusing on the connection rather than the circumstances of its revelation, provided a model of uncomplicated response that the adults might have benefited from emulating. But the adult conversation needed to happen separately, with space for the complex emotions and explanations that weren't appropriate to share with the children. "I think we need some time to discuss this privately," Amara suggested, looking to Garrick for agreement. "While Emery's monitoring continues." "Of course," he agreed immediately. "Perhaps the children could work on Emery's science project in Lyra's room while we talk." With the children settled with appropriate monitoring equipment and sufficient distractions, Amara and Garrick faced each other across her kitchen table, the setting for so many revelations over the past few days, now hosting perhaps the most significant conversation of all. "I want to explain why I never told you," Amara began, determined to address the most obvious question directly. "Not to justify it, but to help you understand my reasoning at the time." "I'm listening," Garrick replied, his tone free from judgment or defensive anger. "When you left, when the divorce proceedings began, I was only 3 months pregnant. I hadn't told you yet because—" She hesitated, memories of that painful time resurfacing with unexpected clarity, "because your family had already made their opinions clear about my suitability as a Thornfield mother. The condition that made me too thin would surely make me incapable of carrying a healthy child." Garrick's expression reflected pained recognition of these quoted assessments, words likely spoken by his mother or other family members during their campaign against the marriage. "Then when I discovered I was pregnant, despite their dire predictions, I planned to tell you after the first trimester when the highest risk of complications had passed," Amara continued, the explanation one she had rehearsed in her mind but rarely spoken aloud. "But by then you had already made your decision. You had already determined that my condition made me unacceptable as your wife." "I was wrong," Garrick said quietly, the simple acknowledgement free from qualifications or excuses. "Catastrophically, unforgivably wrong." "Yes, you were," Amara agreed, the validation of her experience creating an unexpected moment of connection. "But my decision to not tell you afterward came from a place of protection, for Lyra and for myself. The man who had rejected me for my medical condition didn't seem likely to welcome a child who might inherit that same condition." "A reasonable conclusion, based on my behavior," Garrick acknowledged, his self-awareness catching her off guard once again. "Though deeply painful to recognize now. When Lyra was born, healthy, defying all the medical predictions your family had cited, I considered contacting you," Amara continued. "But by then, you had moved on. Your company was taking off. Your life was progressing exactly as you'd planned without the complication of a wife with medical needs. A life that proved hollow in ways I didn't understand until much later," Garrick interjected softly. "Perhaps. But at the time, introducing a child into that equation seemed like inviting more rejection, more judgment, more potential harm." Amara met his gaze directly. "I chose to build a life where Lyra would be valued unconditionally, not measured against Thornfield standards of acceptability." The explanation hung between them, not an accusation but a rational assessment of choices made based on available information and past experience. Garrick absorbed it thoughtfully, his response measured rather than defensive. "Thank you for explaining," he said finally. "I can't say I wouldn't have made the same choice in your position, given how I behaved and the values I demonstrated at the time." The unexpected response, empathy rather than entitlement, understanding rather than accusation, created another shift in Amara's perception of the man before her. "You're not angry?" she asked, genuinely surprised by his reaction. "Angry at whom?" "At you for protecting our daughter from a man who had already rejected her mother for a medical condition. At myself for creating a situation where such protection seemed necessary." He shook his head slightly. "No, not angry. Profoundly regretful about the years lost, but not angry." The maturity in his response, accepting responsibility rather than deflecting blame, suggested a level of growth that Amara was still reconciling with her memories of their marriage. "What happens now?" she asked, the practical question that would determine their path forward. "That depends largely on what you and Lyra want," Garrick replied, again surprising her with his prioritization of their preferences rather than asserting his own. "I would like to know my daughter, to be part of her life in whatever capacity you both feel comfortable with. But I recognize that I forfeited any right to make demands or impose expectations." "And legally?" Amara pressed, the question that had concerned her most when considering revelation. "Legally, I would be honored to be recognized as Lyra's father with all the responsibilities that entails," he said carefully. "Financial support, educational opportunities, inheritance rights. But I have no desire to disrupt the life you've built together or to challenge your primary role in her upbringing. The balanced response, acknowledging rights and responsibilities without threatening control or dominance, addressed her core concerns about revelation without creating new ones. She's curious about you, Amara admitted. Has been for years, though she stopped asking directly when she was younger. Since discovering you're her father, she's been cautiously excited about the possibility of knowing you. I would like nothing more than to know her, Garrick said, genuine emotion evident in his voice. She's extraordinary, Amara. A testament to your parenting and her innate brilliance. She has your analytical mind, Amara acknowledged, the observation easier to share now that the truth was acknowledged between them. The way she approaches problems, builds systematic solutions, that's all Thornfield. But her emotional intelligence, her empathy, her ability to connect with others, Garrick shook his head slightly. That's pure Curry. Qualities I've only begun to develop in myself these past few years. The mutual recognition of their daughter's inherited traits, celebrated rather than evaluated against rigid standards, created another unexpected connection between them. For the first time in 12 years, they were truly seeing each other as the parents of a shared child, with all the complex emotions and responsibilities that entailed. I think we should ask Lyra what she wants, Amara suggested. She's old enough to have input into how this relationship develops. I agree completely, Garrick said immediately. Her comfort and well-being should guide every decision. The conversation with Lyra that followed, conducted with both honesty and age-appropriate considerations, revealed a daughter who had thought deeply about the implications of discovering her biological father. I have questions, she began directly, seated between them in the living room while Emery rested in the guest room. Lots of questions. That's understandable, Garrick replied. And you deserve honest answers. Why did you leave Mom? The first question cut straight to the heart of their shared history, displaying Lyra's characteristic directness. Garrick glanced at Amara, silently checking whether he should answer or defer this painful topic. When she nodded slightly, he turned back to Lyra with the same honesty he had shown in their adult conversation. Because I was wrong, he said simply. I allowed my family's prejudices and my own ignorance to guide decisions that hurt your mother deeply. I failed to value her as she deserved, failed to understand her medical condition, failed to stand by her when it mattered most. The unvarnished admission, free from excuses or deflection, seemed to satisfy something in Lyra's assessment of his character. Would you have left if you knew about me? She asked next, the vulnerability beneath the question evident despite her composed expression. No, Garrick answered without hesitation. If I had known about you, nothing would have kept me away. Not family pressure, not business opportunities, nothing. But you still would have had the same prejudices about Mom's condition, Lyra pointed out with perceptive logic. You might have stayed, but would you have changed how you treated her? The challenging question, insightful beyond her years, created a moment of genuine reflection for Garrick. I'd like to believe I would have evolved faster, learned sooner, but truthfully, I don't know, he admitted. The person I was then took far too long to recognize his own failures. Until Emery was diagnosed with the same condition, Lyra concluded, connecting the narrative threads with characteristic insight. Yes, Garrick acknowledged. Having my son face the same condition I had once judged your mother for was, illuminating about my own prejudices. A cosmic irony, Lyra observed with unexpected maturity. The universe teaching lessons through direct experience. Exactly, Garrick agreed, clearly impressed by her philosophical framing. A lesson I wish I had learned without causing pain to others, but one I needed nonetheless. The honest exchange, neither overly emotional nor artificially detached, reflected both Lyra's unusual maturity and Garrick's respect for her intelligence. As the conversation continued, practical questions emerged about how this newly acknowledged relationship would function. Do you want me to call you Dad? Lyra asked directly. I would be honored if you chose to, Garrick replied carefully. But that's entirely your decision, in your own time. I haven't earned that title yet. And where will I live? Will everything change now? The question revealed the underlying anxiety beneath Lyra's composed exterior, fear of disruption to the stable life she had known. You will continue living with your mother exactly as you always have, Garrick assured her. Nothing changes unless you want it to change. My hope is simply to know you better, to be part of your life in whatever way feels comfortable for you. Like how you are with Emery, she asked, seeking concrete understanding of the relationship model being proposed. Similar, yes, though Emery's situation is different because his mother chose to leave after his diagnosis, Garrick explained. Your mother has been consistently present, supportive, and fundamental to your development. That relationship remains primary and unchanged. The respectful acknowledgement of Amara's role, without attempt to diminish or supplant it, addressed core concerns that had shaped her decision to reveal Lyra's paternity. This Garrick seemed to understand boundaries, respect existing relationships, and prioritize Lyra's emotional well-being over his own potential desires or legal entitlements. I think I'd like to know you better, Lyra decided finally. Slowly. And I want Emery to be my brother officially, not just secretly. I would like that very much, Garrick replied, emotion evident in his voice despite his composed expression. At whatever pace feels comfortable for you. And Mom needs to be okay with everything, Lyra added firmly, her protective instinct toward her mother touching Amara deeply. She's been taking care of me by herself forever. No one gets to make her feel bad about any of her choices. I couldn't agree more, Garrick said without hesitation. Your mother has done an extraordinary job raising you. Anything I might contribute now is supplemental to the foundation she's already built. The conversation established preliminary boundaries and expectations, regular visits, shared activities with both children, transparent communication about scheduling and plans. Throughout it all, Amara observed the careful respect Garrick showed for their existing family structure, never presuming authority or entitlement despite the significant revelation. When Lyra suggested sharing the news with Emery, eager to officially claim the sibling relationship she had already begun to value, the adults agreed, recognizing that honest communication would serve all their interests better than continued secrecy. Emery's reaction to learning that Lyra was his half-sister displayed the same straightforward enthusiasm he had shown earlier, immediate acceptance, excitement about the connection, and practical questions about how this would affect their relationship. Does this mean we can see each other all the time now? He asked hopefully. Like regular siblings? We'll work out arrangements that allow you to spend time together regularly, Garrick assured him, glancing at Amara for confirmation. Absolutely, she agreed. Your friendship was already important before we knew about the biological connection. Now we have even more reason to support it. The remainder of the day passed in a strange new reality, acknowledging relationships that had existed biologically but not socially, creating preliminary plans for a future that would involve connection rather than separation. Throughout it all, Amara observed the careful balance Garrick maintained, engaged but not intrusive, interested but not demanding, present but respectful of established boundaries. That evening, as the children collaborated on adapting Emery's science project to include their newly discovered genetic connection, Amara and Garrick found themselves in another kitchen table conversation, becoming the unofficial setting for their most significant discussions. Thank you, he said simply, for telling me about Lyra, for allowing me the chance to know her. I recognize what it cost you to reveal a truth you had protected for 12 years. It was time, Amara replied. She deserves to know her father. And despite our history, you deserve to know your daughter. I want to formalize my financial responsibilities, Garrick said, shifting to practical matters with characteristic directness. College funds, health insurance, supplemental support. Not to intrude on your independence, but to ensure Lyra has every opportunity available to her. We can discuss that, Amara agreed cautiously, though we've managed well enough until now. Of course you have, he acknowledged immediately. This isn't about questioning your provision or suggesting inadequacy. It's simply about contributing appropriately to our daughter's future. The careful framing. Supportive without being undermining, generous without being controlling, reflected a nuanced understanding that the Garrick she remembered had rarely demonstrated. "There's something else we should discuss," he continued after a moment. "A professional matter that might interest you given your research focus." "What's that?" Amara asked, curious despite herself. "The Thornfield Foundation has been seeking a director for a new metabolic research initiative," Garrick explained. "Someone with both clinical experience and innovative research approaches to conditions like MAD. Your name was already at the top of the candidate list before our reconnection." "You want to hire me?" Amara asked skeptically, immediately wary of complicated entanglements between their personal history and professional opportunities. "I want the foundation to consider you based solely on your qualifications, which are exceptional," Garrick clarified. "The selection committee operates independently from my direct influence precisely to avoid concerns about favoritism or conflicts of interest. And the fact that I'm your ex-wife and the mother of your recently discovered daughter wouldn't complicate that professional relationship?" Amara's skepticism was evident in her tone. "It would certainly create unique circumstances," Garrick acknowledged honestly. "But I believe strongly in your research approach, in the potential impact of your work for people with MAD, including our children. That belief exists independently from our personal history." The distinction he drew between professional respect and personal connection suggested a maturity in his thinking that Amara was still reconciling with her memories of their marriage. "I'll consider it," she said finally, neither accepting nor rejecting the possibility outright. "But any professional relationship would need clear boundaries and independence." "Absolutely," Garrick agreed immediately. "Your work deserves recognition and support on its own merits, regardless of our personal connection." As evening approached, bringing with it the conclusion of Emery's monitoring and the inevitable transition to new arrangements, practical questions arose about next steps. The temporary domestic arrangement that had brought them together had served its purpose, providing comprehensive data for Emery's treatment protocol and creating unexpected space for personal revelations. "I'll complete Emery's protocol tomorrow and send it to you," Amara explained as they reviewed the final monitoring data. "It will need adjustment over time as his body continues to recalibrate, but the foundation is solid." "Thank you," Garrick said simply, "for everything, the medical expertise, the patience with his questions, the personal revelations that have changed all our lives." The sincere gratitude, free from entitlement or presumption, reflected the consistent respect he had shown throughout their unexpected reunion. "It was time for truth," Amara replied. "For all of us." As they prepared for Garrick and Emery's departure, now with plans for regular visits rather than uncertain separation, Lyra approached with a characteristic directness that reflected both her mother's forthright nature and her father's decisive approach. "I've been thinking," she announced to both adults, "about names and stuff." "What about names?" Amara asked, immediately attentive to her daughter's thoughts on this sensitive topic. "Well, I'm Lyra Curry now, but technically I should be Lyra Thornfield Curry or Curry Thornfield, right? Since I'm both of yours." The practical question, jumping directly to legal and identity considerations, reflected Lyra's characteristic focus on concrete realities rather than emotional complications. "That would be an option if you wanted it," Amara confirmed carefully. "But there's no rush to make that decision." "Absolutely no pressure," Garrick added immediately. "Your identity and how you choose to express it should be entirely your choice, in your own time." "I think I want to think about it more," Lyra decided. "But I wanted you both to know I'm considering it. For official papers and stuff." The mature approach, considering options without rushing to decisions, reflected the thoughtful nature both parents had contributed to her character. As the conversation continued, establishing preliminary plans for regular visits and shared activities, Amara observed the genuine connection developing between Lyra and Garrick, tentative but real, built on recognized similarities and mutual curiosity rather than obligation or entitlement. Later that evening, after the children had said their goodbyes with plans to see each other soon, Garrick paused at the door for a final conversation with Amara. "I know we have a complicated path ahead," he said quietly. "Co-parenting after 12 years of separation, navigating Lyra's needs while respecting established boundaries. I want you to know I'm committed to making this work on whatever terms you determine are appropriate. I appreciate that, Amara replied, genuine despite her lingering caution. This isn't how I imagined Lyra would discover her father, but now that it's happened, I think it could be positive for her to have you in her life. That means everything to me, Garrick said simply. And Amara, I truly am sorry for everything that happened 12 years ago. For the prejudice and ignorance I displayed, for not being the man you deserved. The unqualified apology, offered without expectation of forgiveness or reconciliation, carried weight beyond the words themselves. This was not the entitled, judgmental man who had once found her medical condition too inconvenient to accommodate in his life plans. This was someone who had been humbled by experience, educated by suffering, transformed by responsibility. Thank you for saying that, she acknowledged, the words easier to offer now than they might have been days earlier. It matters, even 12 years later. As he left, plans in place for the next visit and medical follow-up, Amara found herself facing a future distinctly different from the one she had imagined just a week earlier. The carefully constructed boundaries between past and present had dissolved, replaced by complex new connections that would require navigation and adjustment. Yet beneath the complexity lay a surprising simplicity, two children who deserved to know each other as siblings, and two parents committed to their well-being despite a painful shared history. Whatever came next would be shaped by that fundamental truth, that Lyra and Emery's needs would guide their decisions, superseding old wounds and lingering resentments. 6 months later, Amara stood in her expanded office at the Thornfield Metabolic Research Center, reviewing data from a groundbreaking study on childhood MAD treatments. The professional opportunity Garrick had mentioned had indeed materialized, though she had insisted on a rigorous independent selection process to ensure her appointment was based on qualifications rather than personal connection. The transition had been complex but ultimately positive, allowing her research to reach more patients while maintaining her clinical practice with specialized cases like Emery's. The boy had thrived under her customized protocol, gaining strength and confidence as his body learned to work with its natural rhythms rather than fighting against standardized approaches. Lyra had adjusted to knowing her father with characteristic resilience, approaching the relationship with curious caution, establishing her own boundaries while exploring the connection. She had ultimately decided to legally add Thornfield to her name, becoming Lyra Curry Thornfield in recognition of both parents' contributions to her identity. The co-parenting arrangement had evolved organically, regular visits, shared educational activities, holidays that included both households while respecting established traditions. Throughout it all, Garrick had maintained the respectful boundaries he had promised, never presuming authority or entitlement, consistently prioritizing Lyra's comfort and Amara's established parental role. A knock at her office door interrupted Amara's reflections. Garrick stood in the doorway, maintaining the professional distance they had established for workplace interactions. The board approved your research proposal, he informed her, evident satisfaction in his tone. Full funding for the pediatric MAD protocol development. That's excellent news, Amara replied, genuine excitement overriding the professional formality they typically maintained at work. This approach could transform treatment standards for children like Emery. Like Emery, like you, like potentially Lyra in the future, Garrick acknowledged, the shared concern for their children's well-being a foundation that transcended their complicated history. Your work is changing lives, Amara. Our work, she corrected, acknowledging the Foundation's role in making the research possible. The resources you've provided have accelerated the development significantly. The professional collaboration, built on mutual respect rather than personal entanglement, represented one facet of their evolving relationship. As co-parents, colleagues, and cautious friends, they had established a functional dynamic that prioritized their children's well-being above lingering personal history. Lyra mentioned wanting both of us at her science competition next week, Garrick said, shifting to parental matters now that the professional update was complete. If you're comfortable with that arrangement. Of course, Amara agreed without hesitation. She's worked incredibly hard on her genetic inheritance project. She gets that dedication from you, Garrick observed with genuine admiration. The persistence in pursuing answers despite obstacles. And the analytical approach from you, Amara acknowledged, these recognitions of shared traits now comfortable rather than threatening. She combines our strengths in remarkable ways. The mutual appreciation of their daughter's characteristics, free from the judgment or competition that might have colored such observations in the past, reflected the evolution of their relationship over the past 6 months. Whatever romantic connection had once existed between them had been replaced by something different but equally significant, a partnership focused on nurturing the extraordinary children they had created. As Garrick left to attend a foundation meeting, Amara returned to her research with renewed purpose. The path that had brought her here, from rejected wife to single mother to respected specialist, had been neither straight nor easy. The unexpected reunion with Garrick, the revelation of Lyra's paternity, the formation of new family connections, none of it had followed a predictable pattern. Yet the outcome, however unexpected, had ultimately benefited those who mattered most, Lyra and Emery, 2 children with the same genetic predisposition, now supported by parents who understood their needs and valued their unique characteristics without judgment or condition. If life had taught Amara anything in the 12 years since her divorce, it was that healing rarely followed expected timelines, that growth often emerged from painful experiences, and that the universe sometimes delivered lessons in packages too ironic to be coincidence. The man who had once rejected her for her medical condition now championed research to support others with the same diagnosis. The family that had found her unsuitable as a Thornfield mother now welcomed her daughter into their legacy. Sometimes, she reflected, the journey back to wholeness required first being broken, and the path to understanding often wound through territories of ignorance and prejudice before reaching wisdom. For Garrick, that journey had come through his son's diagnosis with the very condition he had once judged so harshly in his wife. For Amara, it had come through the strength she had developed as a single mother, transforming vulnerability into expertise that now helped others. And for their children, Lyra and Emery, the journey had only just begun, but with guides who had learned through experience the value of acceptance over judgment, of support over criticism, of seeing difference as variation rather than defect. Perhaps that was the most important lesson of all, that the body's differences, like life's challenges, were not flaws to be corrected but variations to be understood. Each with its own rhythm, its own timing, its own unique pattern of thriving when properly supported rather than forcibly changed. If this story of unexpected reunion and complicated healing has touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe for more tales that explore the complex journey toward understanding and acceptance. Remember that sometimes our harshest judgments return to teach us their most painful lessons, and that the measures we use to value others eventually become the standards by which we ourselves are measured. Until next time, look for the wisdom in life's ironic turns, and remember that sometimes the people who once hurt us the most become the catalysts for our greatest growth. The next morning, Amara arrived at the research center early to finalize preparations for a metabolic monitoring workshop she would be leading later that day. She was surprised to find Lyra already waiting outside her office, perched on a bench with a notebook in hand. "Sweetheart, what are you doing here?" Amara asked, checking her watch. "Shouldn't you be heading to school?" "Half day," Lyra explained, holding up a permission slip. "Teacher development. I thought I could observe your workshop if that's okay. It's directly related to my science project." Amara smiled at her daughter's initiative. "Of course you can. Let me just get settled, and I'll introduce you to the team." As they entered her office, Lyra grew uncharacteristically hesitant. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Anything," Amara replied, recognizing the thoughtful expression that preceded Lyra's deeper questions. "Are you happier now? Since everything changed with Dad, Garrick, and Emery coming into our lives?" The question caught Amara off guard, not because it was inappropriate, but because she hadn't directly confronted this assessment herself. She considered it carefully before responding. "I think I am," she admitted. "Not because our life before wasn't good, it was. You and I were happy together. But there's something healing about resolving things that were left unfinished, about seeing someone learn from their mistakes and truly change. And watching you develop a relationship with your father and brother has brought joy I hadn't anticipated." Lyra nodded, absorbing this. I thought so. You laugh more now. And you don't get that worried look when people ask about family stuff. You noticed that? Amara was continually surprised by her daughter's perceptiveness. I notice everything about you, Mom, Lyra said simply. You're my person. The uncomplicated declaration of attachment, delivered with the straightforward clarity only children possess, created a moment of profound connection between them. Whatever changes had reshaped their family configuration, this primary bond remained unshaken, had perhaps even strengthened through the challenges they'd navigated together. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Garrick entered with Emery in tow, both carrying canvas bags filled with monitoring equipment. Sorry to interrupt, Garrick said, noting their private moment. Dr. Hayes asked if we could bring these prototype sensors for your workshop. Emery volunteered to help carry them. And to see if Lyra was here, Emery added with characteristic honesty. Dad said she might be. Perfect timing, Amara replied, gesturing to the workbench where they could set down the equipment. Lyra's going to observe the workshop today. As the children gravitated toward each other, immediately launching into a technical discussion about the monitoring devices, Garrick moved closer to Amara. Everything okay? He asked quietly, having noticed the emotional quality of the moment they'd interrupted. Yes, she assured him. Just one of those parenting moments where you realize your child sees and understands far more than you give them credit for. I have those daily with Emery, Garrick acknowledged. Yesterday he informed me that my parenting style has evolved significantly and that he's documented the improvements systematically. Apparently, he's been keeping a developmental chart on me. Amara couldn't help laughing. That sounds exactly like something Lyra would do. Nature or nurture? Both, I suspect, Garrick replied, watching their children with evident pride. Though I'd argue they got the best parts of nature from you and are improving on whatever genetic contributions I made. Don't sell yourself short, Amara said, surprising herself with the defense. That analytical mind, that persistence, that ability to systematically tackle problems, those are valuable traits they inherited from you. Traits I've always respected, even when I was angriest at you. The admission created a moment of unexpected connection, acknowledgement of positive qualities that had persisted through years of justified resentment. Thank you for saying that, Garrick replied, his voice quieter. It means a great deal coming from you. Before the conversation could continue, Dr. Hayes arrived with the remaining workshop participants, bringing with her the professional shift that helped Amara and Garrick maintain appropriate boundaries in their workplace interactions. The workshop proceeded smoothly, with both children actively participating, Emery volunteering as a demonstration subject for the new monitoring protocols, while Lyra astutely questioned the data interpretation methodologies. The professional researchers were visibly impressed by both children's grasp of complex metabolic concepts, creating a moment of shared parental pride that transcended the complications of their past. Afterward, as the group dispersed for lunch, Lyra approached Amara with another of her thoughtful expressions. I've been thinking about something, Dad, Garrick, sorry, I'm still figuring out what feels right to call him. Take your time, Amara assured her. There's no rulebook for this situation. Well, he mentioned that the foundation is developing a summer camp for kids with MAD and their siblings. A place where the food, activities, and schedule all accommodate metabolic differences without making it weird or medical. He asked if I'd want to help design some of the science activities. That sounds like a wonderful opportunity, Amara replied carefully, noting her daughter's thoughtful hesitation. Are you concerned about something? No, actually I'm really excited about it. But... Lyra glanced toward where Garrick and Emery were packing up equipment. I realized I want to do it because it matters to me personally, not just because of you or Emery, but because it's becoming part of my identity too. Is that okay? The question revealed Lyra's emerging sense of self, finding her own connection to the medical condition that had shaped so much of her family's story, but on her own terms, through her own choices. More than okay, Amara assured her. It's beautiful to see you discovering what matters to you independently, while still connecting with your family history. That's exactly what growing up should be. Lyra's smile was brilliant. Good, because I already told Garrick, that I'd do it. And I may have volunteered you to consult on the nutrition protocols. Amara laughed. I see you've inherited the Thornfield talent for strategic planning as well. Genetic and environmental influences working in harmony, Lyra replied with a grin that reflected both her parents' traits in perfect balance. As they joined Garrick and Emery for lunch in the Foundation's cafeteria, Amara observed the casual ease that had gradually developed between them all, an unlikely family unit forged not through traditional bonds but through conscious choice and genuine effort. Emery was just telling me about his latest metabolic readings, Garrick explained as they sat down. 6 consecutive months of improved stability. The longest streak since his diagnosis. That's significant progress, Amara acknowledged, professional satisfaction mingling with personal care for the boy who had become an important part of their lives. How are you feeling with the adjusted protocol? Like a normal kid, Emery said simply. I still have to be careful about timing and everything, but I don't feel sick all the time anymore. And the other kids don't think I'm weird now that I can explain my condition properly. He's become something of a mad ambassador at school, Garrick added proudly. His science project on metabolic variation won the regional championship and qualified for nationals. With Lyra's help, Emery was quick to acknowledge. She's better at experimental design than anyone in our grade. Another family trait, Garrick observed, meeting Amara's eyes with a look that acknowledged their shared contribution to these remarkable children. Speaking of family, Lyra interjected with characteristic directness, I've been thinking about the summer arrangements. If I'm helping with the MAD camp design, and Emery's participating in the program, maybe it would be more efficient if we coordinated our schedules. Like, maybe I could stay with Dad and Emery some weeks, and Emery could stay with Mom and me other weeks. The suggestion, practical on the surface but weighted with significance, created a moment of silent communication between the adults. It represented another step in their evolving family configuration, one that required careful consideration of emotional boundaries alongside logistical arrangements. If that would be comfortable for everyone, Garrick replied carefully, looking to Amara for guidance. We could try it, Amara agreed after a moment's consideration. On a trial basis, to see how it works for all of us. These arrangements need flexibility as we figure out what feels right. The children exchanged triumphant glances, clearly having discussed this proposal between themselves before bringing it to their parents. Their conspiratorial smile reminded Amara that while adults might deliberate and analyze, children often forged connections with straightforward simplicity. As lunch concluded and they prepared to return to their respective afternoon commitments, Garrick held back slightly, allowing the children to walk ahead while he spoke privately to Amara. I want to check if you're truly comfortable with their suggestion, he said quietly. I'd understand if it feels too much, too soon. It's not what I expected, Amara admitted honestly. But very little about our situation has followed expected patterns. The children are leading the way in many respects, and their instincts seem sound. They want a genuine sibling relationship, not just scheduled visits. They do, Garrick agreed. And I'm grateful for your willingness to accommodate that, given everything. Given everything, Amara repeated thoughtfully. That phrase used to feel like a weight, all the history, the hurt, the complications. But now it feels more like context. The foundation that brought us to where we are now, however unconventionally. A wise perspective, Garrick observed. One I'm still working to develop. You've come further than I would have believed possible, Amara acknowledged, the admission easier now than it would have been months earlier. We both have. The simple exchange, free from the tension that had characterized their early reconnection, reflected the gradual healing that had occurred, not a return to what was, but the creation of something entirely new from the fragments of the past. Later that evening, after the children had said their goodbyes with plans to meet again the following weekend, Amara found herself alone in her kitchen, reflecting on the day's events. The research center, the summer camp plans, the evolving custody arrangements, all represented a life dramatically different from what she had envisioned just 8 months earlier, when she had frozen at the sight of Garrick across a school auditorium. Her phone chimed with a message from Lyra, who was spending the evening at a school friend's house. "Dad invited me to the tech conference in San Francisco next month, the one with the biomedical engineering exhibition I wanted to see. Would that be okay? It's during your research symposium week anyway, so the timing works." The request, so normal yet so reflective of their new reality, brought a smile to Amara's face. She typed back, "That sounds perfect. He'll need to coordinate the details with me, but I think it's a great opportunity for both of you." After sending the response, she paused, struck by how naturally she had approved the father-daughter outing without the surge of protective anxiety such a suggestion might have triggered months earlier. The shift wasn't due to decreased vigilance about Lyra's well-being, but rather increased confidence in Garrick's commitment to responsible parenting, evidence accumulated through consistent actions rather than mere promises. Her phone chimed again, this time with a message from Garrick. "Lyra tells me you've approved the conference trip. Thank you for your trust. I'll send all details for your review, and we can discuss any concerns you might have." The considerate message, acknowledging her primary role while expressing gratitude for her inclusion, demonstrated again how thoroughly he had absorbed the lessons of their complicated journey. She replied, "She's excited about the exhibition. I appreciate your including her in these opportunities that match her interests." Simple communication, focused on their daughter's well-being rather than their complex history, this had become the foundation of their co-parenting relationship. The past wasn't erased, but it had been integrated into a present that prioritized healing over retribution, growth over grievance. As she prepared for bed that night, Amara found herself contemplating the unlikely journey that had brought them all to this point. The devastating divorce that had once seemed like an ending had ultimately become just one chapter in a longer story, a painful but necessary diversion that had eventually led back to connection, albeit in a form neither of them could have anticipated. The cosmic irony that had forced Garrick to confront in his son the very condition he had rejected in his wife had not delivered its lesson as punishment but as opportunity, a chance to reconsider entrenched judgments, to evolve beyond limiting perspectives, to become the father both his children deserved. And for Amara, the unexpected reunion had provided resolution to questions long unanswered, validation of choices painfully made, and the chance to transform professional expertise into personal healing, not just for herself but for a boy who shared her condition and a daughter who had inherited her resilience. Most remarkably, the children themselves had demonstrated wisdom their parents were still struggling to fully embody, accepting differences without judgment, forging connections across complicated histories, finding commonality in shared experiences rather than division in past grievances. Perhaps, Amara reflected as she drifted towards sleep, that was the true legacy they were creating together, not perfect harmony from broken pieces, but a new composition that incorporated discord into its structure, creating something richer and more nuanced than simple resolution could provide. The following weekend found them gathered at Garrick's home for what had become a monthly tradition, a family dinner that included not just Amara, Garrick, Lyra, and Emery, but occasionally other significant figures in the children's lives as well. Tonight, Emery's metabolic specialist Dr. Chen had joined them, eager to discuss the customized protocol Amara had developed that was now being implemented with other young MAD patients. The preliminary results are remarkable, Dr. Chen was explaining as they shared a meal carefully timed to accommodate both Emery's and Amara's metabolic needs. Especially in adolescent cases where standard approaches have historically shown the poorest outcomes. Your timing-based methodology challenges fundamental assumptions about metabolic stabilization. That's because those assumptions were developed without input from people actually living with the condition, Amara replied, the professional confidence she had developed over years of having her expertise questioned now evident in her tone. Medical protocols need to be informed by lived experience, not just laboratory data. A perspective I've come to appreciate much more deeply, Dr. Chen acknowledged. Thanks in large part to your research, and to Emery's persistent advocacy for his own needs. Emery made me listen when traditional medical wisdom wasn't working, Garrick added, pride evident in his voice. He refused to accept that feeling worse was an inevitable part of treatment. I just knew something wasn't right, Emery explained with characteristic modesty. And then when I met Amara and saw how she managed her mad without being sick all the time, it confirmed what I'd been trying to tell everyone. Sometimes the patients teach the doctors, Dr. Chen said with a humble smile. Especially when those patients have expert advocates in their corner. The conversation continued, weaving between professional observations and personal anecdotes, creating an atmosphere of intellectual engagement and mutual respect that had become characteristic of their gatherings. Throughout the evening, Amara noticed Lyra watching the interactions with thoughtful attention, absorbing the dynamics between adults who had found common purpose despite their complicated histories. After dinner, as Emery showed Dr. Chen his latest metabolic tracking system in the study, Lyra approached her parents with the determined expression that typically preceded an important declaration. "I've decided something," she announced. "About my name." Garrick and Amara exchanged glances, both immediately attentive to their daughter's statement. "I want to make it official, Lyra Curry Thornfield. Not because I need a different identity, but because this one feels complete. It acknowledges both of you, and that feels right to me now." The simple statement, delivered with characteristic directness but weighted with significance, created a moment of emotional connection between the three of them, acknowledgement of a journey that had brought them from fractured past to integrated present. "If that's what you want, we'll start the paperwork," Amara assured her, recognizing the importance of her daughter's choice. "It would be an honor," Garrick added simply, emotion evident despite his measured tone. "Good," Lyra nodded decisively. "And I've been thinking about something else too. The Foundation's Family Health Initiative, the one studying genetic factors in metabolic conditions. I want to participate in the research. Not just as your daughter," she clarified, looking between them, "but as someone with a direct personal interest in understanding these conditions better." The declaration of purpose, so reflective of both parents' dedication to their respective fields, created another moment of shared pride, recognition that their daughter was forging her own path while drawing strength from their combined legacy. "The research team would be fortunate to have your perspective," Garrick assured her. "And I can help you understand the participant protocols," Amara added, "though I suspect you've already reviewed them thoroughly." "I have," Lyra confirmed with a small smile that acknowledged how well her mother knew her. "I've also been corresponding with Dr. Whitman about potentially tailoring some of the cognitive assessments to better reflect the neurological variants often present in MAD-adjacent genetics." The sophisticated observation, delivered with such casual confidence, reminded both parents of the extraordinary mind developing before them, shaped by genetics and environment, nurture and nature, challenge and support. Later that evening, as preparations were made for Lyra to spend the night at Garrick's home while Amara attended an early morning conference call with international researchers, another quiet moment of reflection emerged between the former spouses. "Did you ever imagine we'd be here?" Garrick asked as they stood on his porch, the spring evening mild around them. Co-parenting two remarkable children, collaborating professionally, finding a way forward that honors the past without being imprisoned by it. "Never," Amara admitted honestly. "There were years when I couldn't imagine being in the same room with you without reliving all the pain of our ending. And now?" "And now?" he prompted gently when she trailed off. "Now I find myself grateful for the journey, however difficult, because it led us here. To these children, to this work, to versions of ourselves that might never have emerged without the challenges we faced. A perspective that reflects tremendous grace," Garrick observed. "One I'm still working to fully embody." "It's not grace so much as pragmatism," Amara replied with a small smile. "Energy spent on resentment can't be directed toward creation. And there's too much important work to do, for Emery, for Lyra, for all the children who share their genetic heritage, to waste resources on grievances that no longer serve a purpose." "Still teaching me, after all these years," Garrick acknowledged, respect evident in his tone. "Thank you for that, among so many other things." The simple exchange, neither romantic nor resentful but grounded in mutual respect and shared purpose, represented the careful balance they had established, a relationship defined not by what they had once been to each other, but by what they had become for their children and themselves. As Amara drove home that night, the path illuminated by streetlights that created pools of clarity in the surrounding darkness, she reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought her to this moment. The devastating rejection that had once seemed like the defining catastrophe of her life had ultimately been just one chapter in a longer story, a painful but necessary diversion that had eventually led back to connection, albeit in a form neither of them could have anticipated. The universe, it seemed, sometimes operated with a perspective broader than human understanding could encompass in the moment of pain, delivering lessons that appeared as punishment but ultimately served as catalysts for essential growth. The cosmic irony that had forced Garrick to confront in his son the very condition he had rejected in his wife had not been delivered as retribution but as opportunity. A chance to reconsider entrenched judgments, to evolve beyond limiting perspectives, to become the father both his children deserved. And for Amara, the unexpected reunion had provided resolution to questions long unanswered, validation of choices painfully made, and the chance to transform professional expertise into personal healing, not just for herself but for a boy who shared her condition and a daughter who had inherited her resilience. If you found meaning in this story of unexpected redemption and complicated healing, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more explorations of life's profound ironies and second chances. Sometimes our greatest pain becomes the gateway to our most important growth, and the people we thought we'd never forgive become essential partners in our journey forward. Remember that the body's differences, like life's challenges, are not flaws to be corrected but variations to be understood, each with its own unique pattern of thriving when properly supported rather than forcibly changed. Until next time, may you find wisdom in life's unexpected turns, and remember that sometimes the measures we use to judge others eventually become the standards by which we ourselves are measured. But in that reckoning lies the possibility of transformation, for ourselves, for our children, and for the world we create together.